Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is really kind of sensitive and yet hardly ever discussed amongst men. In fact, there is very little study around this topic when it comes to men. It's generally seen as a woman's issue, a woman's problem, things that only women talk about. And yet, it affects 43% of men. And the reason is that men have a tendency to remain very silent about this topic and tend to take care of it on their own. They don't actively seek out professional help generally, and they will implement different activities into their life to try and take care of this. And, this is something very personal to me and something that I have struggled with for nearly my entire life. And it can be caused by your hair, by your weight, by your height, by your muscle structure, and even your manhood. What's up, guys, and welcome to the Men's Empowerment Network podcast. I am Joshua Abel, your host, and I thank you so much for joining me here today. So, as we talked about in the introduction, the topic for today is something that really resonates with women. It's very proactively talked about amongst women. There are professional institutions dedicated to helping women on this topic. And there are countless studies about not only the physical damage, but the mental damage that women project on themselves due to this subject. But there is so little conversation and so few studies when it comes to men about this. And it has to do with negative body image, body dysphoria, or to even a greater extent, body dysmorphia. And I was really surprised when I found out that 43% of men actually struggle with this issue because it's never talked about. Guys aren't hanging out in the locker room talking about how they hate their love handles or their sagging titties or their receding hairline or, their kind of small dick. We just don't talk about that shit in the locker room. And we especially don't tend to seek out professional help when it starts affecting us in a negative way. And this myth that it is a woman's issue has been perpetuated across generations, passed down from mother to daughter, from mother to daughter to mother to daughter. And, it is only exacerbated by, beauty magazines and by our culture as a whole, that a woman is supposed to look a specific way if she wants to be seen as being attractive or sexual or anything of that nature. But what we may not realize is that this is also proposed and kind of pushed on the man as well. We are seeing all these sports magazines. We're seeing all of these fitness magazines. We're seeing it all over social media. We're seeing it in movies and television. The attractive sexual man is chiseled. He's got, a great torso. He's got ripped abs. He's got, good pecs, huge biceps, triceps. His back is in line. And, he's got a full set of hair. If he's shown in his underwear, there's, usually a larger unit hiding in there. And, this kind of stereotype of what a man is supposed to look like is shoved down our throat. And so, when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we don't see that chiseled, nearly unrealistic expectation of what a man should be staring back at us, then it has a negative impact on not only our mental condition, but what we're willing to put ourselves through in order to attempt to achieve that, exacerbated, unrealistic qualification of what it is to look like a man. And, these have huge negative impacts on, self-confidence, increased depression and anxiety, and in severe cases can result into, suicidal thoughts, tendencies, and actions. And I really feel this is something that needs to be opened up into conversation and needs to be severely addressed. Like I said, I have struggled with this for a majority of my life. There has never been a point in my life where I look in the mirror and I see someone who I can be proud of physically. Um, and it is a constant struggle in my mind about, am I working out enough? Am I eating the right foods? Am I, doing everything I need to do in order to compensate for what I believe a man should look like? And, it's caused anxiety, it's caused depression, it's caused, working my ass off in the gym for hours on end. It's caused me to, go on starvation diets, on extreme diets, on fasting, on, I did this one thing called the master cleanse where for 2 weeks, all I did was drink this, what I call Mexican lemonade. It's water, lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and grade B maple syrup. And that's all I ate or drank for 2 weeks, trying to reduce, my body fat and appear to look like how I felt a man should look like. And there is a reason that the diet industry is now a $300 billion industry. They prey on those that lowered self-confidence. They prey on that anxiety. They prey on that depression and perpetuate the idea that if you don't look like this, if you don't look like a Greek god, if you don't look like Hugh Jackman in Wolverine, then you aren't a man. And that is detrimental to everything mental and physical about us as men. And there are a number of different ways that a man can experience, negative body image or negative dysphoria, or to a worser extent, negative dysmorphia. Of course, we all recognize that, the body composition plays a huge role in this. As I've already mentioned, we're expected to have, these fiery guns that, are available to rescue the damsel in distress, this huge pectoral cavity that, we could crush walnuts with our pecs, these washboard abs that just continue on for days, this rock hard ass that, we're supposed to be able to, bounce quarters off of and shit like that. And so a lot of guys will, go to the extremes of, diet and exercise in order to achieve that goal. I know a friend of mine, he spends 3 hours in the gym every single day, not because he's trying to, achieve some sort of notoriety in a competition or, any sort of goal like that, but because his confidence is so shot. And when he looks at himself in the mirror, he doesn't see the guy that everyone else sees, the guy who's put in the work, who's put in the effort, who's, really focused on nutrition and health and working out and things like that. He sees, someone who is flabby, someone who is, unmotivated, someone who is, not doing everything that he needs to do in order to feel like a man and to have that physique that has been perpetuated and forced down his throat his entire life. And, so he kills himself in the gym. And this results in, two types of body displacement imaging for men. It could go either way. If you're too fat, then, you develop unhealthy eating habits to reduce your body fat and to reduce your weight and to get down to a thinner frame than what you feel like you are. And you kill yourself in the gym to the extent of, borderline anorexia, sometimes bulimia, and things like that because of that negative body image that you have about yourself. And then it could go the other way as to where you're eating unhealthy amounts of protein, unhealthy amounts of, food, and killing yourself in the gym because you just aren't building the muscle that you feel like you should have in order to look how a man should look. And like I've said, I mean, this is mentally distressing to a lot of men. 43% of men can identify with having some sort of body dissatisfaction or body dysmorphia. And it really plays a key factor in the overall mental and physical health of a guy, the overall quality of life that they have. And in extreme cases, some guys are resorting to surgical procedures. I was watching this show on, I think it was Netflix or something called Botched. And it's all about the plastic surgery industry, and how people go to extremes in order to look how they feel like they should look. And there was a guy on there who was actually having implants where natural muscle should be growing. And, he had lat implants, he had ab implants, he had pec implants, all to coincide with an image that he had in his mind of what he should look like. Now, that's an extreme case, but it's not terribly uncommon. It's just not talked about. And we really need to open up the conversation and let guys know that how they look is okay. It's okay to be comfortable with who you are right now. The quality of your life will drastically improve in accepting who you are and what you look like right now. 10% of guys have identified as being either anorexic or bulimic. And, that I believe is probably I believe that's probably an rated statistic. Because again, guys have a tendency not to talk about these things. They have a tendency not to go out and seek professional help from a physician or a therapist or, some sort of clinical worker who can work not only on the physical aspect of their life, but on the mental. And so I really believe that statistic is much, much lower than it actually is. And, because of that shame, because of that stigma of men aren't supposed to care what they look like, a lot of guys are going to extremes and hurting themselves mentally and physically. Another way that a guy can have, body image issues is their height. The quote unquote perfect man is standing at around 6 foot, 6'1". Most of us aren't living up to that, myself included. I'm standing at about 5'9", which in America is considered average. I am of average height. And I say 5'9" because I want to push myself, a little higher. It's probably more like 4'8.5". But, I have on my driver's license 5'9". I tell everyone 5'9". I don't know exactly what it is, but I too, want to be taller. I always wanted to be, that 6 foot stature, that ideal man. And, there's not a lot that we can do to change our height until recently. There have been medical breakthroughs, and men are taking advantage of limb lengthening surgeries. And I was blown away when I first started researching this and found out that it was actually a thing. I'd never heard of it before. And then I went into a rabbit hole of how it's done and the results of it and things like that. And, what they do is they will either cut the femur bone or the tibia, and they'll put this rod in there that, and with an external, kind of pack on the outside. And every day, what you do is you kind of press a button on the outside of this pack, and the rod inside of the bone lengthens, over time, gradually. And it takes about a course of a year for, this surgery to have completely, healed and mended and gotten you to, a higher, stature. And this is, to me, it's crazy. That is insanity that, a man sees himself as being less of a dude because he's not at the height where he feels that he should be. And to go to such an extreme length in order to achieve that goal based on, society, pressures of society and, mental conditioning, to go to that extreme length. And operations like this cost anywhere between 60 and 150 grand. And, I was researching guys who have gone out of the country in order to get, reduced uh, uh, cost in these cosmetic surgeries. And the reasoning behind it is all due to, a mental incapacity, really having that lack of self-confidence in your stature. And the results varied, but the general consensus was a gain in 2 to 3 inches in height. And, 2 to 3 inches, makes a big difference, especially if you're a guy. And one of the guys that I had researched started off at 5'6", and so he was below average height. And maybe there's a a common phrase called Napoleon syndrome, where a really short dude would try and be an alpha male. And I just listened to the words that I used, tried to be an alpha male. And so even in my head, there is kind of a stigma or a a kind of a comparison of a short dude compared to, someone of average or tall height. And, so this is deeply enrooted in how we see a man should be. I should never have said tried to be, an alpha male. That has nothing to do with height. And so, as I'm talking it out, I'm actually realizing, that deep hardening conditioning that I have inside myself regarding height. And, I know that whenever I am, standing next to someone who is 6 foot, I kind of feel a little inferior. I kind of feel a little less than. And, I have always wanted to be, a 6 foot tall dude. Um, well, I mean, unless I'm willing to pony up to 150 grand and go through hellacious, painful surgery, that's never going to happen. Something else that, causes a lot of body imaging issues with men is male pattern baldness. Now, this is a common element when it comes to body dysphoria and body dysmorphia amongst men. It's very commonly talked about, and probably one of the only elements that is actually communicated, to the general population. But why is that? It's because of the money that can be made in this, and the wide market value that this condition has. It's statistically shown that about 80% of men will suffer from some sort of male pattern baldness in their lifetime. And as a result, it's erupted into a $7 billion industry. There are lotions, there are potions, there are pills, there is surgery, there is even hair in a spray can, for God's sake. But it's a $7 billion industry as of 2023 because they understand the negative impact that a receding hairline can have on a man. This industry is projected to increase into a $30 billion industry over the course of the next decade. Isn't that insane? These companies prey on, the lack of self-confidence that guys have based on their imaging, based on their body, the way they see themselves, physically. And not much is being done to get to the root of these issues, of the mental aspect of what is causing that lack of self-confidence and things like that, which is a true shame. And then, guys, you have probably all gotten those spam emails guaranteeing a way to make your junk bigger. They're everywhere, dude. They're everywhere. They're in your spam folder. They're in your social media. They're everywhere. Take this pill and your Johnson's going to grow like 2 to 3 inches. Get another 1.5 inches of girth if you rub this cream on there. Yeah. Okay. Well, that is crazy talk because, it can definitely be an emasculating issue. And I don't make light of it because, this is certainly a topic that isn't talked about. But when you're in the locker room and you can't tell me that you haven't done it, or at the urinal, and you kind of take a sneak peek at another dude, and he pulls out a python and you're hanging there with an inchworm, you're not going to feel kind of self-confident or self-conscious. I mean, that's just how we're wired. And I'm telling you, any dude who says, "Oh, I've never looked at another guy in the locker room, or never checked out another guy at the urinal, that's gay," blah blah blah. Sorry, they're lying. It's human nature to compare yourself to another human being, and that is one way that we compare ourselves. Because again, it's shoved down our throat that in order to be a man, you've got to have a big dick. You've got to swing that thing around. And, it's what's between your legs that really counts. And of course, this has been exacerbated and, really driven home by the porn industry. You're not going to pop on a porn and see some dude with a micro penis making a chick wail. It's just not going to happen. And, we see this as our manhood. We see this as, being the defining factor of what makes a man. And the bigger the dick, the bigger the man. When it's no wonder that when we see a guy driving around in, you know, some sort of hot rod car, Camaro, a Mustang, you know, a big fucking truck with dualies and you know, two mufflers on the back, that we say he has small dick syndrome. You know, he's trying to compensate for something. And so that stereotype, that negative connotation of, you know, a man's cock size is in direct relationship to, you know, his stature as a man, is really, you know, has a negative impact on, you know, how we view ourselves and how we see ourselves as men. And of course, you know, this is a huge industry as well. You know, the porn industry perpetuates this. And then, of course, you know, if you're watching porn online, what kind of advertisements are you seeing? You're seeing advertisements for pills and lotions and potions and, you know, uh, 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 pumps and stretch things to stretch out your dick and your balls and things like that. You know, it's commonplace for those ads to be at the front, in the middle. I never make it to the end of the porn, so I don't know about the end. But you know, it's very commonplace for those ads to be there because you're seeing, you know, these, you know, guys with huge rods, you know, plow away. And then you look down at what you're dealing with, and you're like, oh shit, damn, I need some work down there. Um, and so, you know, they're very well placed and they're very strategic about their ads because they're playing upon that psyche. They're playing upon that mental conditioning. They're playing upon that stigma. And they know that you're going to fall for it. And I, I, I'll be honest, I have never tried any of those things. You know, it's never been an issue with me, um, and that I don't really think about it a lot. But there are guys out there who do, and you know, we really need to be sympathetic to them, um, because you know, everyone is unique, and that goes for the manhood. You know, I did I went down another rabbit hole on uh penile enlargement surgery. Okay. All right. So this is strange. You know, guys who are uncomfortable to the point where they feel that they need a surgical procedure to take care of what's going on down there will go onto the surgery table, go under anesthesia, and what the surgeon will do is it's kind of like getting butt implants or lip injections. They will extract fat from one part of the body, and they will inject it into the shaft of your dick. And I'm going to level with you guys. I looked at some before and after pictures, and trust me, if that's the result, you don't want to do that. I mean, it was weird. Um, and was it bigger? Yeah, but a lot of times there are, um, you know, consequences of irregular shape. You know, the fat will start moving around in there. And so, you know, you could have curvature that you didn't want to begin with. Um, you know, there are a host of other problems from infection and things like that. So, I mean, if it comes to the point where in any of these cases, you feel like surgery or some sort of evasive procedure is the end all solution, then it may be time to take a step back and, you know, look for the underlying cause of where this problem lies, because I can guarantee you it's not in your dick size. And to be quite honest, the average penis size in America is 5 inches. So I don't know where you fall in that. And honestly, it doesn't really matter, because your manhood is not in direct proportion to your dick size. It just isn't. And I know a lot of guys suffer from that. And I've been in the locker room, and when I catch a glimpse of some dude who's hauling around, a python, I'm like, fuck, damn. Good luck. I mean, what do you say to that? But and I'm I guarantee you that even guys who have what is sociologically deemed as the perfect physique, they've got a full set of hair, they've got rippling muscles, they've got a big dick. Somewhere in there, there's some insecurity. They are feeling that their body isn't good enough in some way. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times in this podcast that this has really been a focal point of negative feelings and emotions for most of my life. And I did a kind of a deep dive into why that was for me. And growing up, I was basically raised by women. My dad was at work all the time, working to support his family, and I had my mom and I had my 3 sisters. And as is stereotypically, body imaging is very much proponent in the female woman culture. And so those ideas of what the perfect person should look like was most certainly passed down along to me. My mom, she grew up in the 50s and 60s. And back then, it was very commonplace to give girls, women, amphetamines in order to cut down on weight. And my mom was no different. Her mom gave her amphetamines so that she could lose weight. And my mom always said that she felt fat. She felt so fat because some kids bullied her and teased her at school about her weight. And I've seen, a senior picture of my mom, and she was beautiful. She was a beautiful woman. Um, she looked healthy. She wasn't fat by any means, in no way. But that emotion, that negative self-talk, that negative self-imaging plagued her entire life. And, she was always on a quest to be thinner, to the point where she barely ate anything. And, every time I would go home to visit, she would look thinner and thinner and thinner. And when I saw her on her deathbed, she looked like a skeleton. Like, she was that thin. She looked just horrific. And it was really sad to watch. But that idea of, in order to be good looking, in order to be attractive, in order to be sexual, I had to be thin, to the point where it would very much distort, how I saw myself. And I was always on a mission to be thinner. And, I wasn't really um, uh, uh, obsessed with muscle growth. I wanted to be thin. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, Calvin Klein came out with a series of ads that was kind of coined heroin chic. And these models were so sunken in and so malnutrition, and yet they were sexualized and they were deemed as being attractive. And it was something that I could identify with. I wanted to look like a Calvin Klein heroin chic model. And of course, grunge was big. Everyone was wanting to be gaunt and, kind of shriveled and shrunken. At least that's how I saw it in my head. And so that's the image that I strived to achieve, to the point of, skipping meals, fasting, starvation, and things like that, living on a very, very restrictive calorie diet. And, who knows what physical harm I was doing to myself. I now know the mental harm I was doing to myself, but like every other guy, I didn't I didn't go and seek out professional help. I didn't go and talk to a doctor. I didn't go talk to a therapist about it. And then immediately following that media campaign, Abercrombie and Fitch started coming out and becoming really popular. And in their ads, it was young guys my age who were ripped. They were all playing rugby and football. They had the girl. They had their shorts hanging down so you could see their perfect ass crack. You could see the V in their hips leading down to their junk. They had ripped abs. They had huge pecs. They had huge biceps, perfect hair. And so my image of what a guy needed to be shifted. And so that's what I wanted to be. That's what was sexual. That's what a guy should look like. They're my age. I should absolutely look like that. And so I started crushing myself at the gym, working out 2-3 hours, lifting weights, doing cardio, eating protein. And to the point where, I would work out no matter whether I was sick, no matter whether I was injured, no matter what the case was, and no matter what I did, I was never able to achieve that idea of what I thought a man should look like. And then, none of my friends looked like that. I didn't have any guy friends who looked like an Abercrombie and Fitch model. But in my head, I needed to be there. And, every time I would look in the mirror, I'd grab my stomach and be like, "You're a fucking piece of shit. You're worthless. You're useless. No one will love you because you don't look like that." How detrimental to my personal development. How demeaning and degrading I was to myself because I didn't look like what the media told me I should look like. Looking back on it, I was so hard on myself. And even today, I look in the mirror and I don't see the guy I feel like I should look like staring back at me in the mirror. And even today, I give myself a hard time. A couple of years ago, I had ballooned up. I'd become depressed and alcoholic and, completely out of control. And I ballooned up to 235 pounds. And again, I'm 5'9". If you're watching on YouTube, I'll throw up a picture of what I looked like. I show people that picture today, and they're like, "That's not you." Um, but I ballooned up because of my depression, because of my anxiety, uh, resulting into leading into alcoholism, in part because, when I was sober and working out, I still wasn't achieving the result that I felt that I needed to achieve. And so I always felt like I was falling short. Speaking of short, I'm only 5'9". And that's another thing that, especially when I'm standing next to someone who's 6 foot, my idealistic height, I get down on myself about feeling and being what I assume is short. And then my hair, you know, I was obsessed with my hair growing up, especially, in my teens, early 20s, obsessed with it. If you're watching on YouTube, I have this high widow's peak. And so the arches on my forehead go back pretty far. And, I would go into my stylist, once a month and ask her, I'm like, is my hair receding? Am I going bald? Is this something I need to worry about? My ever basically everyone on my mother's side, all the men, they're going bald. Do I need to worry about this? How long do I have before all my hair falls out? And obsessing about it. Never mind, my dad had a full set of hair until he was well into his 60s and he's 75 now. And, it's just now starting to thin um, noticeably, but obsessive about my hair and making sure that, every single hair was in place, making sure that, nothing was out of place and that everything was perfect with my hair because I was obsessed with what other people thought about how I looked. Body dysphoria plagued me, plagued me. Horrific the way that I would talk to myself. Disgusting. And then, of course, you know, um, I, I, to be quite honest, I've never measured my junk. Um, thought about it, honestly, thought about it. I just never got around to doing it. Um, but I don't know. I feel comfortable with what I got, which is good. And I'm not saying that, braggingly or anything like that. It's not huge by any means. Um, but I don't know. I, I don't know. We're going to move on past that because I'm not going to harp on that. But, you know, uh, it's a thing. It is a thing. And I can certainly understand why some guys would, you know, uh, uh, really create a relationship between the size of their dick and, how they feel as a man. And um, I certainly empathize with that. And so, you know, this all comes from, you know, there there's not a lot of research about where body dysphoria, body dysmorphia, negative body imaging comes from on a psychological level. There's not a lot of research around that. Some speculate that it stems from childhood trauma, specifically in men who have been sexually abused. And that is another topic that has very little conversation surrounding it and really should be brought to a greater light. But men who were sexually abused in childhood have a greater tendency to have body displacement issues. Other studies suggest that it's developed in early adolescence and into the teenage years. And I think I can empathize with that because, during those crazy years, our hormones are going insane. We're growing like crazy, both in height and possibly in width. We're trying to keep up with our peers, and we're really dictated by social pressures and what people think about us, and what our friends think about us. And then we're really influential by media. What media is telling us looks beautiful and what doesn't. And to me, that's where I believe that I first started really targeting and really honing in on how I look, that early adolescent and into the teenage years. And it really became a severe factor in my life then, and became a concrete value in my self-respect, and how I viewed my self-respect and how I lived my life. No, and of course, genetics. Genetics plays a huge portion in that. And we are passed down our genes from our parents. And so you know that doesn't necessarily only constitute your physical appearance, but your mental as well. It's been studied that a parent who has some sort of spectrum of body dysphoria or body dysmorphia, some sort of negative body imaging, genetically passes down that thought process to their kid. And so that could play a huge role in why I place such high value on how I look. It really dictates a big portion of my mental state. And I mentioned that I was at my uh, highest weight. I was 235 pounds. And one day after, I'd gotten sober and was sober for a bit, I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the human being staring back at me. I saw myself as a monster physically. And so, I started doing activities and taking action to correct that through nutrition, through exercise, and, just a better lifestyle. And I'm closer to what my target weight is. But that in itself is, up for debate. And not just debate, it shouldn't be a factor at all. That number on the scale fluctuates so dramatically, depending on the time of day, depending on your mood, depending on a whole host of factors, that number on the scale is irrelevant. And yet I allowed it to dictate my life. Now, my target weight, quote unquote, my ideal weight is around 165 at 5'9". And I'm currently at about 175. And so I'm noticing recently that I'm jumping on that scale more, multiple times a day, to see where I'm at. And it's becoming obsessive, even though I know that that number does not dictate the state of my health. It is merely a number that really is irrelevant, because a guy my height could jump on the scale and be 230 pounds, but he's all lean muscle, no visceral fat, no, no other fat, and, just a very lean cut. But that number says that he's obese. Isn't that crazy? That number that we all use to dictate our overall health says that bodybuilder, that guy who's stacked with lean muscle that I so envy, is deemed overweight or obese. And yet a guy who, is 5'9" and 165, perfect ideal weight, is nothing but fat and bone. And, so we can't really allow that number to dictate, how we live our lives. And that's actually something that I need to work on more. And another element of quote unquote healthy lifestyle is BMI, body mass index, which again is a lie. And what it does is it calculates based on your height and your weight, where you should fall within the body mass index. But it does not take into account your muscle mass. It does not take into account your fat mass. It doesn't take into account so many things that are better proponents of overall actual health. And so we're fed all of this garbage, and we're fed all of these lies to make ourselves believe that we are less than men based on how we look. And it negatively affects how we feel as men. And so, this is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, because I have suffered from it for so long. And to some degree, still suffer from it. Even though I lost all of that weight, now when I go to the gym, and I do certain activities like a plank, and, my shirt kind of opens up, my t-shirt, and I look down and I see loose skin kind of wiggling there. It literally makes me want to vomit. It literally, I get so down on myself, even though I have made healthy choices, even though I've take corrective action to, improve my overall health, increasing muscle, reducing fat, reducing weight, and have seen magnificent improvement, not only in my sleep, but my mood, my energy level. I'm not as achy in my joints as I was, and so many other great benefits to the lifestyle choices I've made to correct where I was. I still look down there and I'm like, damn, you are still that fat fucking piece of shit. And so even I have a lot of work to do, especially on the mental aspect of it. Really taking that mental corrective action to see myself as a physically attractive, sexually attractive, viable man. And that really all starts in the mind. And part of it comes to an understanding that I am not alone. You are not alone. I can nearly guarantee you that every single man on the planet has something about his body that he wishes he could change, that he's tried to change, and it just doesn't work. and gets down on himself for. I guarantee you. And guys, we have got to start opening up the conversation around this issue. Now, there is a very distinct difference between body dysphoria and body dysmorphia. Body dysphoria is to a lesser extent and more of how I relate to this topic. Body dysphoria, you look in the mirror and you're like, fuck, I want to change this about myself. I just don't feel good about this. My hair, my stomach, my pecs, my arms, whatever the case may be. I just don't feel good about this physically. It's making me feel bad about myself. I don't like myself with looking like this or having this issue. When it starts progressing into body dysmorphia, that's when professional mental help may need to be sought, because that's when it starts affecting your overall life quality. It can affect your social contributions, affect your relationships, affect your health for sure, affect your work, affect different aspects of your life. And if you have gotten to the point where you are all consumed about some aspect that you perceive negative about your physical appearance, to the point where it is disrupting other parts of your life, I really, really encourage you to seek out professional help from a therapist, from a psychologist, from a physician, because there are certainly cases as to where it goes to the point of anorexia, bulimia, on the other end of the spectrum, steroid use, overly working out to the point of obsession. And looking back on it, I may have been borderline because, I would put going to the gym ahead of other aspects in my life. I would put it ahead of going to AA meetings. I would put it ahead of my relationships. I would put it ahead of my nutrition. If I work out an extra hour and then cut back on, my calorie intake a little more, then, I'll be able to achieve that perfect physique faster. But it never happened. It never happened. And that's when some sort of acceptance needs to come into play. We are blessed with this one body that we have in life. We are eternally blessed with this body. And, it's a lot of it has to do with genetics, of course, and you don't really get to choose, the body that you're given. Otherwise, we'd probably all look the same. And so fortunately, we're not given that choice. But there certainly are actions that you can take, not only to improve yourself physically, but mentally as well. And when I came to the understanding and started on the journey of acceptance of, who I am physically, what I look like physically, and started taking that approach to health, I really noticed a big difference in a mental shift. I started being able to see little positives, in my overall health and in my physical appearance. my muscle growth in my chest and in my arms, the shrinking of belly fat around my abdomen, uh, my ass not having so many dimples in it, and things like that. And when I was able to start on a journey of acceptance, because I certainly have not gotten to the point where I just accept this is what I look like. I am happy to make improvements every single day, or at least attempt improvements every single day, so that I can get to the point where I can look in the mirror and say, I like you, dude. I love you, dude. You're a good looking dude. But it's a work in progress, and like every other aspect of our life. And then, not only having conversations with other guys, but, getting involved with other guys about ways to improve your overall physical health, physically and mentally. Getting in with a core group of guys who are on a mission, who offer accountability, who offer support, can do so much for your self-esteem and for reducing that negative body imaging that we have, that negative body dysphoria, or that negative dysmorphia. Guys, I really hope you got value out of this. I certainly, this was a topic that kind of popped in my head, and I'm like, holy shit, this has had a huge impact on my life. And it's something that's not talked about amongst guys, and it really should be. So I really do hope that you got value out of it. Please make sure to share this podcast if you know of any other dudes who might benefit from this episode or any of the other episodes. I would greatly appreciate you sharing and spreading the word. I'm working on getting better at social media. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and I've got a Facebook group. Honestly, I have been very inconsistent in it, but I will work on taking steps to becoming more consistent at it. Those links will be in the show notes down below. You can always email me. That'll be in the show notes, as well as the Men's Empowerment Network website. Guys, I sincerely appreciate you being here today. This podcast would not be able to move forward without you. And love to all, my friends. Cheers.